Over 2 weeks, that is how long it took for this surgical strike to become a regional inferno. 3 weeks of the master plan to lie in ruins. Wide explosions rock Iran as Tehran responds with a new wave of missiles. President Donald Trump refuses to consider any agreement to end the war on Iran. Iran announces its readiness to investigate attacks on civilian targets while accusing Washington of replicating its drones to target neighboring states. But the story of week 3 is written in oil and blood. The United States targeted Karg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal, the artery of its economy. Tehran's response was swift. The Fujairah port in the UAE, a vital hub outside the Strait of Hormuz, is now suspended following drone attacks and fire. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil flows, is effectively closed. Insurance rates have skyrocketed. The US Navy is reluctant to enter. And President Donald Trump, who launched this war on a feeling, now finds himself at a crossroads he cannot control. CNN, in a sweeping analysis, lists 7 reasons why Trump cannot win this war. The Washington Post publishes a poll showing that 63% of Americans find the number of casualties unacceptable, and 65% say the administration has not clearly explained its goals. And yet the war continues. The Federal Reserve meets this week to weigh interest rates, caught between stagflation fears and political pressure. The US is moving 2,000 Marines from Japan to the Middle East, depleting the Pacific. The occupying entity is bombing Lebanon, and Hezbollah is responding with 8 attacks in a single day. 3 weeks in, the question is no longer who will win. The question is, how does this end, and what cost to the world? All these questions and more with a distinguished panel of experts on All 24 News special shortly. Hello there and welcome to tonight's special coverage on the war in Iran. And to understand where we are on day 16, we need to look at the cascade of events that have brought the region and the world to this precipice. Our own Zahra Farjani has this report.
After 16 days of the U.S. Zionist strikes on Iran, the Middle East is still a war zone. According to Iranian media, explosions and the sound of warplanes were heard over Isfahan in central Iran and Hamadan in the west. Iran's Tasnim news agency said Zionist and U.S. aircraft targeted civilian buildings in Hamadan, leaving several people injured and some in critical condition, while fighter jets continued flying over Isfahan. The Revolutionary Guard also said it shot down American and Zionist drones over Tehran and Tabriz. Meanwhile, Tehran announced the 54th wave of its True Promise 4 operation, using the Sigil ballistic missile for the first time since the war began. Iran's military also said drones targeted the Adafra US base in the United Arab Emirates and regional command centers in the south and center of the occupied Palestinian territories. The Revolutionary Guard also issued strong threats against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while US President Donald Trump said Washington will not agree to a deal with Tehran unless strict conditions are met.
Iran wants to make a deal. I don't want to make a deal because the terms are not good enough yet. Any agreement must ensure Iran completely abandons its nuclear program. Our objectives are clear. We are destroying Iran's missile capabilities, eliminating its naval fleet, and ensuring the world's leading state, sponsor of terrorism, never obtains a nuclear weapon.
In response, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran is not interested in talks with Washington. In an interview with CBS, he added that Iran will continue defending itself until Trump realizes the war is illegitimate and unwinnable.
No, we never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes, and this is what we have done so far, and we continue to do that until President Trump comes to the point that this is an illegal war with no victory.
In parallel, the U.S. threatens to carry out additional strikes on Iran's Karg Island, the country's main oil export hub. Trump told NBC News that previous U.S. strikes had destroyed most parts of the island and warned that more attacks remain an option as tensions continue.
We may carry out additional military strikes against Khark Island, one of Iran's most strategic oil export centers. Previous strikes caused extensive damage there and sent a clear message about the United States' ability to target strategic sites when its interests or security are threatened.
As exchanges of strikes and threats continue, prospects for negotiations remain uncertain, raising fears that this war could further expand across the region.
And to dissect the third week of this war, the reckoning, we are joined by three distinguished experts from two continents. From Glasgow is Dr. Yvonne Ridley, British journalist and author, Middle East affairs commentator. Dr. Yvonne Ridley has spent decades analyzing U.S. policy in the region and will help us understand the historical context and the strategic failures of this war. Dr. Yvonne Ridley, thank you indeed for agreeing to be with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure indeed. And from Dhaka, Bangladesh is Dr. Gregory Simons, a PhD researcher at the Institute for Russian and Eurasian Studies, Uppsala University. Dr. Simons brings a unique perspective on how the global South, Russia and Asia are viewing this conflict and its implications for the international order. Dr. Simon, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us at this early hour for you. And from Genoa, Italy is Mr. Mark Lowe, business risk and security analyst. From Genoa, Mr. Mark will guide us through the economic chaos, the energy markets, the supply chain disruptions, and the financial instability that now threatens the global economy. Mr. Mark Lowe, thank you indeed for agreeing to be with us tonight.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Always a pleasure.
Thank you indeed. And of course, we are going to start with the escape of control here. And we begin perhaps with a bigger picture. CNN published a comprehensive analysis this week titled 7 Reasons Why Trump Hasn't Won the Iran War. The reasons include the Strait of Hormuz crisis, the lack of a military solution, the regime's survival with a more hardline leader, at least according to the narrative of Western media, and the nuclear question unresolved, as well as the absence of a popular uprising, the divergence with Israeli goals, and rising domestic political pressure in the US. So my first question is directed to you, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. So you've watched multiple US administrations stumble in the Middle East before. The CNN analysis suggests that this war is following the pattern of Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, a war of choice that becomes a quagmire of some sort. So is history repeating itself, or is there something fundamentally different about Iran that the planners in Washington failed to understand?
No, I think you could be right, Kareem. I think that history is repeating itself, but the stakes this time are incredibly high because I think what we are witnessing is the end of American domination anywhere in the Middle East. America has scores of military bases across the Middle East and Asia. And I think that what we are witnessing now is the end of that presence in that area of the world. And this is hugely important because it also puts a huge question mark on the future viability of the Zionist state of Israel. And the problem is, although both Israel and America claim to be democracies, they are not promoting the presence of the media. So we're getting all sorts of speculation, very loud, increasingly louder rumors that the supreme leader, the latest one, has died, that Benjamin Netanyahu has died, along with Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and other senior members of the Israeli government. So we're getting a lot of mixed messages. But the one constant in all of this is that it is not going America's way. And even Donald Trump, who is liable to come out with all sorts of nonsense, including mission accomplished, which we're expecting from him, there is no victory to be had in this war. There never was going to be. And all of the severest critics who have predicted another Vietnam, it looks as though their words will come back to haunt this administration. And the mood on the social networks has changed dramatically. The Make America Great Again lobby is peeling away from Trump in their millions, their tens of millions. All of that support, all of the goodwill that he engendered has absolutely gone. He's frittered it away because he promised the ordinary people of America no more wars. I am a man of peace. And of course, he started so many wars in the last few months that people are beginning to ask legitimate questions about the sanity of the American president.
Thank you indeed. And let's include Dr. Simons now. Dr. Simons, from your vantage point in Dhaka, how is this being viewed in the global south? I mean, CNN's analysis is a damning indictment from a mainstream American outlet. Does this signal a loss of confidence in US leadership? And how are powers like Russia and China positioning themselves as the US appears to be losing control here?
Well, as Yvonne said, I mean, this is quite a iconic moment in the decline and fall of Pax Americana in West Asia and probably abroad. I mean, it's clear, and from here especially, and if you get CNN and mainstream media, which are criticising him, they're normally the biggest war cheerers of them all, and they're not cheering anymore. One thing is absolutely clear, and this is that Trump's mouth is writing checks that his brain has no hope of cashing. Trump spent his youth trying to avoid war, well, serving in it at least. This is the family legacy, 5 generations of Trump dodging the draft. And you compare that with the Ayatollah, the former one and the current one. The current one has been serving in war, in the US proxy war, using Iraq as a proxy, and that he chose to do even though he had privilege, unlike Trump used privilege to get out of it. Trump doesn't understand war. He definitely doesn't understand the Iranian mind and this Shia approach to dignity, honor, and these kinds of questions. And you can see he's trying to use his same rhetorical approach. And this is, rather than being substantive, what this demonstrates, he barely has tactics and there is no strategy to what he is doing. He just keeps on trying to raise the stakes. I think he thinks he's still on The Apprentice, where he's in charge, when clearly he is not. And you can see this hyperbolic use of rhetoric and this use of bluster and bluff, where he tries to browbeat his opponents with this kind of psychological operations into giving up. It's absolutely the wrong opponent. They understand clearly what is happening. Russia and China also understand what is happening. And it's absolutely in their interest to support Iran. Iran is a key member of the global south in West Asia, as Russia is in the European and China in the Indo-Pacific. They are all key components. And so Iran cannot fall for a number of reasons. This is not Venezuela or Libya or some other weak country. And the threat of sending 2,500 Marines into Hague Island is, you can't even say it's delusional. It's beyond delusional. How are you going to get these ships through the Straits of Hormuz? Is Iran just going to sit there and let 2,500 Marines enter that island? This is going to make Battle of the Little Bighorn look like a picnic. This will be live. This will be streamed live. So his bluster is not working because it's just gone well off the threshold of plausibility and reality.
Thank you indeed. Now, Mr. Marklow, let's shift a little bit to economy here. The CNN analysis, although focuses on military and political factors, the economic dimension is still staggering. Now, the Strait of Hormuz alone is a 200 billion a year problem. How do markets process a situation where the world's superpower cannot solve a basic maritime security challenge? And what is the risk premium now baked into every barrel of oil, according to you?
Well, you ask a number of very, very pertinent and very important questions, which I will answer with great pleasure. But before doing so, if I can just very, very quickly link to something that the Greg mentioned and the Yvonne mentioned, and in particular what Greg said about Donald Trump not actually understanding war. What we have right just now is an American president who does nothing other than make ridiculous statements on a continuous basis. The vast majority of them are focused on the United States of America's military power, etc. Fine, we all understand that. But what seems to elude Mr. Trump is the fact that military actions are nothing more than a means to an end. If you don't have a political objective, your military power serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever. And the fear is exactly that. There is no strategy. So the use of military power remains something of a very, very large question mark. To what end? There is no political objective. So to what end all of this? That said, let me go back to your questions, and apologies for that little interlude. But yes, I mean, we know very well that the Straits of Hormuz carries, well, it doesn't carry, around 20% of the world's oil, and a lot of its gas passes through the Straits of Hormuz, which makes it obviously one of the most important, especially from an energy point of view, one of the most important choke points on the planet. So going back to the concept of the markets, due to the fact that so much energy passes through such a narrow corridor, even the threat, never mind the actual disruption, but even the threat will shake global markets. So markets don't only have to price in the loss of supply, they also have to price in to the overall equation the credibility of those who are creating the problems in the in the entire region at the moment, but especially in one of these most critical shipping lanes. So the markets are also having to factor into the equation the complete and categoric absence of any end strategy or any ability to actually determine when all of this might come to an end. Add to that the fact that, okay, the Strait of Hormuz is not a door, you don't close it, but that is basically what is done, and it's not done in a terribly sophisticated or difficult manner whatsoever. The straits can be closed relatively easy, but unfortunately, it's incredibly difficult to guarantee any form of safe passage once the straits have been mined, or once the straits are in a scenario whereby small and very, very fast craft are attacking vessels passing through it, or from the mainland, from the east, missiles or drones are targeting vessels. So can you block that? The answer is an extremely difficult thing to do. So when we have a scenario where basically the world's largest naval power seems absolutely unable to guarantee safe passage, then all investors, all of the markets begin to question the stability of the entire security architecture of the region, with a whole series of consequences of both a direct and an indirect nature. Open close parenthesis. In all of this, the White House is now asking European states to send naval vessels to guarantee safe passage through the straits. So it really is not going from bad to worse, but it's, these are scenarios that would be very, very hard to invent, to make up. Absolutely incredible. Anyhow, the concept of the premiums that are embedded in every barrel of oil is nothing else than the reflection of fears of escalation, fears of attacks on tankers, and above all, the fear of prolonged instability.
But then, according to the latest military and economic developments, Mr. Maklow, the United States did bomb Kong Island, which is Iran's main oil export terminal, meaning handling 90 to 95% of its crude exports, about 1.7 million barrels per day, Mr. Mark. Now here, Iran retaliated by targeting the Fujairah port in the UAE, disrupting oil loading operations and causing fires. Now, Iran has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz to US and allied shipping, though it is reportedly considering allowing tankers to pass if transactions are conducted in Chinese yuan. Now, Mr. Maklow, this is something unprecedented, as we all know. Kog Island is to Iran what Ras Tanura is to Saudi Arabia, and Fujairah is the UAE's gateway to the Indian Ocean, bypassing the strait. Both are now in the crosshairs. What does this mean for global oil supplies, for tanker insurance rates, and for the price of everything that moves by ship, let's say? And what is the yuan for passage signal? Is Iran breaking the petrodollars back?
Right. That's quite a few questions to pose all at the same time. So let me try and do my best to answer them in more or less the same order as you asked them. Now, Kog Island is basically Iran's primary oil export terminal. If that is in a situation whereby it is no longer in the condition to export anything, then we have a very serious problem. Not all of us, but a number of countries have a very serious problem. But that then reflects upon global oil supply. So it means that it's also becomes a problem for those that do not buy Iran's oil. At the very, very same time, in Fuji, the effective blocking of the production export from this energy hub is another very, very important consideration, because it was designed specifically to reduce dependence on vessels passing through the Hormuz choke point. So with both locations being threatened simultaneously, what do the markets do? Markets see risks at both export points. They see risks to the alternative transport routes. They see nothing other than absolute chaos. So if we then start looking at the most direct impacts, for example, insurance premiums on tankers, well, first and foremost, right just now, the tankers aren't moving because you can't get any insurance. And nobody that's moving $100 million of oil is going to risk going through a war zone without any insurance policy. So that is not a joke at all. So all of this creates something very, very simple, and it's called tankers lying at anchor. They're not moving the product about. This is a very, very serious problem. When eventually the situation changes, then insurance policies are going to be very, very high in any case, which has the knock-on effect of making absolutely everything that's transported much, much more expensive. Let's not forget that it's not only oil and gas that passes through Hormuz. It's also a considerable amount of the global container transport that passes through. They're very, very important hubs in the Gulf. So container traffic is also directly impacted, and container traffic is very, very expensive. Greater insurance premiums mean that anything that's inside a container, when it arrives at the consumer or it arrives at whoever needs it, that could be a company that has an engineering project in the Gulf, the prices are going to be much, much higher. And let me just close the yuan for passage concept. Well, that would suggest that Iran might allow some tankers through the straits if the oil that it's transporting is traded in Chinese yuan rather than US dollars. But even there, I noted earlier on today that even some Chinese observers are rather cautious in the sense that implementing such a system would actually be very, very difficult. And it could also strain Chinese-US relations even more than they are actually strained. So right just now, it's more of a sort of geopolitical signal about currency diversification, more this than any risk of a collapse of.
Mm-hmm. Well, we seem that we are having an issue with the connection, Mr. Marklow, so we'll get back to you to finish up that thought. Meanwhile, I redress another question to Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Dr. Yvonne, there is a historical irony if we come to look at it here. The US went to war to supposedly secure the region, and 3 weeks later, its own allies, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, are now under fire. Bahrain reports intercepting 124 missiles and 203 drones since February 28th. The US security umbrella is apparently not just failing, it's becoming a lightning rod. How do Gulf leaders explain this situation to their populations? Are they the ones being protected by the military bases of the US, or they are the ones protecting USA? Dr. Yvonne Ridley, can you hear me?
We know that the leaders of the Gulf states are very competitive, and there is rivalry between them, although they like to put on a united front for the benefit of the media. However, while they all thought that by hosting the US military in their countries would give them cover and protection, what they've suddenly realized now is that they have a target on their back. And that is why I said earlier that I think that what we could be witnessing is the end of the American domination and presence in the Middle East, in particular, these state-of-the-art military bases that have been provided for them on very generous terms by Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE. And so I think that this close-knit alliance is starting to fall apart, especially with Israel moving behind the scenes to try and favor the UAE and make it the dominant force as opposed to Saudi. As I say, these states, they put on a united front for the media, but behind the scenes, they are extremely competitive. And Bahrain, you mentioned, has suffered more than perhaps the others. It has cancelled its Formula One racing, which might seem small, but it isn't. It is costing a lot of money. People in Bahrain rely on an income coming out of the Formula One event, and now that that's been cancelled, that will be ringing alarm bells. Also, Dubai is seen as a magnet for holidaymakers. Well, no longer. People can't actually get there. They can't get flights there. And many who use Dubai as a step over to another destination are finding that they're having to look for alternative routes. So it's not just the oil situation that is crippling them. It is lots of other
businesses.
Corporate
And since you mentioned the Dubai as being some kind of a flights hub, actually there is breaking news saying that fire broke out near Dubai International Airport following drone attack. And that's not the only thing. Even Donald Trump is saying, and he's cautioning that NATO may have or may face a difficult future if its allies do not assist the United States in its standoff with Iran. So the US bases apparently is not doing enough, and he wants NATO to join in.
Yes, he's put pressure on Britain, France, and other European countries asking for them to send warships into the region, into the Straits of Hormuz to help secure the key shipping route out of the Middle East. But the Iranians, they have turned round and said the Straits of Hormuz are open to everyone apart from America and its allies. So the Iranians are playing, it's like watching a 7-dimensional chess game being played against a kid who only plays tiddlywinks. And, they seem to be outmaneuvering the US president at every stage. But he said, Trump did say that he had hoped China, France, Japan, and South Korea would also send ships to the passage where a number of tankers have been attacked. What is interesting, though, is there are no US warships within striking distance of the Straits of Hormuz. So you have to wonder what's happened to them. Where have they gone? We know that one of the warships took a direct hit from an Iranian missile, but we're being told, no, it was a fire in the laundry room. Well, treating the rest of the world like idiots when we're seeing albeit grainy pictures of warships on fire, is fooling no one. And of course, both sides don't want to admit if they've been really wounded, but you have to wonder, there was this great big American armada of military ships that was sailing out, and where is it now? Because it's certainly not anywhere in the shipping channel. And we keep hearing Trump saying that 100% of Iran's military capability has been destroyed. But Iran is still sending out drones. There's talk of the Straits of Hormuz being mined. I've sailed in the Straits, and it is a very narrow waterway that would be incredibly easy to block by various means. And I'm sure that the Iranians have worked this out well in advance. We keep hearing about boots on the ground, but that is not going to shake the Iranians. If Trump was going to take on Iran, he had to take it out, and he hasn't done that at all. What he's done is he's poked a stick in the hornet's nest, and the result is predictable. A lot of people are getting stung, and the fallout is global. It's hitting the billionaire class, but it's hitting the working class as well. And the pressure is building up now. I think that Trump could very well be removed quite soon, or we could see him being impeached, because the citizens of the world won't put up with this much longer. They're already marching in the streets and protesting, but the big corporations and the banks and the insurers are also starting to stir.
Thank you indeed. Now, Dr. Simons, the UN for passage signal is pretty profound. And China is Iran's largest oil customer. So if Iran begins pricing oil in yuan and offering passage only to yuan-paying customers, this is a direct challenge to the petrodollar system. How does this play into the broader BRICS de-dollarization agenda? And is the US, by waging this war, accelerating the very thing it seeks to prevent?
Well, coming to your last question first, yes, it very much accelerates. I mean, Trump is, to put it diplomatically, a moron, and that is an insult to morons. He has no understanding of the geopolitical and geo-economic aspects. He's used to being a bully boy, bullying those around him and coercing them to comply. And of course, China understands. I mean, it's no coincidence that before Iran, you had Venezuela, you had the attack on Nigeria. So this is an attempt of economic warfare in geoeconomics where Trump is attempting to collect and control as much of the global energy supply as possible. And if he was able to do that, which he will not be able to, then he'd be able to coerce and ensure that China finds it difficult to continue to rise, because China is seen as the main threat to US, this Pax Americana. And that is correct, but the way you're going about it is absolutely wrong. And looking at this, it's just desperation. And people can smell the desperation. I mean, Yvonne has noted correctly. I mean, you just listen to the garbage which he's saying. Oh, we've beaten Iran, we've destroyed their navy. Well, Iran is not a maritime power. It's not an air power. It's a continental power. It relies on the projection of land force as its means of power and influence. And if he is talking about putting boots on the ground, conventional military doctrines states that you should have, at least as an attacker, have a minimum of a 3-to-1 numerical superiority over the defender. Iran has a standing army of at least 1 million people. Plus, then you got militias. So he would need an army of at least 3 million. And the US doesn't have 3 million troops, and it sure as heck doesn't have the capacity to get them there. US is, as I said, a maritime power. It only can project some form of continental power in the Western Hemisphere, and not really beyond. So hence its desperation in trying to get others to do the dirty work for them. I mean, and I think now some are starting to get the epiphany, although it's been around long enough. I mean, Kissinger once said, to be an enemy of the United States can be dangerous. To be a friend is fatal.
Thank you indeed. And speaking of fatality, now the economic impact, back to you, Mr. Monclo. If we speak about the economic impact, it is now actually hitting home. The Federal Reserve meets on March 18th to consider interest rates. Forecasters expect them to hold steady, but the backdrop is really grim. So January and February jobs reports showed losses. GDP growth was revised down to 0.7%, and oil prices are spiking. Wells Fargo economists call this the Fed's worst nightmare. High inflation and a weakening labor market simultaneously. Meanwhile, U.S. gasoline prices have surged past $3.63 per gallon. Now, Mr. Monclo, could you explain stagflation to our viewers? The Fed has no tool that solves both inflation and unemployment at the same time. If they raise rates, they crush jobs. If they cut rates, inflation explodes. With a war draining resources and disrupting supply chains, are we looking at a 1970s-style economic crisis? And what does that mean for the average American family, even the European family, already struggling with grocery bills?
Right. Start with the easiest, basically. Allow me the luxury of doing this. Stagflation. Basically, stagflation is something that occurs when high inflation combines with weak economic growth, and generally also a rise in unemployment. And it is particularly difficult because the tools that are generally used to fight inflation can then actually damage employment and growth. Raising interest rates might, in a certain fashion, control inflation, but it also is something that risks slowing the economy and therefore, by consequence, increasing job losses. So, cutting rates can stimulate growth. Yes, this is true, but it can also cause inflation to further accelerate. So it is something that is an absolute, the concept of stagflation, the concept of having to deal with that which is necessary to avoid it, is a major headache for all of the financial agencies, all of the financial operators, all of the financial bodies, banks, etc., etc. We're in a moment of shock. Unfortunately, we have all been dragged into war that none of us wanted anything to do with at all. We've been dragged into war that serves absolutely no purpose other than to disrupt an already delicate global scenario. We've been dragged into war that, and let us not forget the promise that the United States of America would never again be involved in a forever war. All of these promises, these throwaway ideas, may very well be that Mr. Trump didn't actually know what a forever war was. I mean, all we know today, and this is something quite incredible. I mean, if we stop for a moment and reason in terms of Donald Trump having launched an idea that's even worse than George W. Bush's idea to invade Iraq in 2003. I mean, it takes a lot to make a worse mistake than that, but Mr. Trump has managed to make a worse mistake than Bush made 20 plus years ago. Quite incredible. So the global economy will suffer directly and indirectly. The global economy will suffer over time. What Yvonne said earlier on about this being a massive shock and there will be no return to what things were beforehand, absolutely correct observation on her part. And we go back to your question set. Will this resemble the oil crisis of the 1970s? Well, it's a different world. We use oil, for example, in different ways. During the 1970s, a lot of European countries used far more oil to generate electrical power than is done now. We have renewable sources, we have alternative sources, more nuclear facilities, etc. So a direct comparison with the mess of the 1970s, yes and no. But I mean, most certainly, and I speak as somebody that filled up the petrol tank of the car earlier on today. And yes, of course, I noticed a considerable increase in fuel prices here in Italy. There will be inflation. Families will suffer. American families will suffer. European families will suffer. Families throughout the world are going to suffer. But we're the lucky ones, because all we're going to be doing is suffering inflation, while other people are being bombarded while asleep in their beds. So we're the lucky ones. The only thing we're going to have to deal with is inflation, perhaps higher mortgage rates, borrowing will become more expensive, loans, etc., etc. But the knock-on effect of this unprecedented mess, and I say unprecedented because in terms of absolute stupidity, I can't think of any other occasions that are of a similar dimension. So we will most certainly suffer. And Mr. Trump has to take into consideration his midterm elections, where if the Americans are suffering the results of a large rise in inflation, this may well be a factor that will end his days as a powerful as a powerful president. And hopefully, again, going back to what one of the other guests said, hopefully a long time before November, somebody will intervene, a group will intervene, and this gentleman will be removed from office. Not so much for his own good, but for everybody else's good.
Thank you indeed. And since you mentioned the midterm elections, let me redirect this question to Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Dr. Yvonne Ridley, the political dimension is critical, as we have discussed earlier, and the Washington Post poll shows that 63% of Americans find the number of casualties unacceptable, and 65% say the administration has not clearly explained its goals. Yet the war continues, with midterm elections approaching. How long before this becomes a political liability for Republicans? And can Donald Trump survive a prolonged conflict with no end in sight?
It already has become a political liability for the Trump administration. His popularity ratings have plummeted. He is seen as putting Israel first ahead of America. So the MAGA movement, the people from the right, they are peeling away in their support in their millions from Trump, and it is concerning the Republican Party about what is going to happen in the midterms. This is it's like an unexploded bomb that's ticking away, and it's putting Trump under greater pressure. Politically, his ratings have never been lower. People are wondering about his immigration policies, which were at first thought to be attractive until the arrival of this private army of Trump's called ICE, the immigration units, came on board and started killing innocent civilians in the street. You just have to look at the protests and the demonstrations and the size of them. And we've made reference to Vietnam before. And I would say that people are drawing parallels with that era right now. He has never been as unpopular as he is. And this latest war is called the Epstein War. There are many people who suspect that Donald Trump launched this attack on Iran, apart from being pushed into it by Netanyahu. People suspect that his inclusion in the Epstein files may have something to do with it. And all of this speculation and rumor is growing by the day. It's not at all helpful to Trump. And his reaction in his press briefings has been extraordinary. He's insulted journalists. He called one female journalist piggy. He insults others. He can't take criticism. He's very sensitive to any form of criticism. And of course, his behavior in recent months has not been that of a strong leader who is in control. He's kidnapped the Maduros. He's launched this war on Iran at the insistence of Netanyahu, and the dynamics of that relationship is being questioned by American taxpayers as well. You know, the healthcare system in America is in a shocking state, and there are people who are wandering around in agony who can't afford to pay for private healthcare. And then they look and hear and see that all of their tax dollars are flooding into Israel, a country they can't find on the map because it's so small. It's not even the size of a South African game park. And the American people, you know, they are feeling a recession is coming round the corner. Now that the body bags are starting to come back, there are 13 dead so far. The Americans don't have a stomach for war. And to see all of these coffins draped in the stars and stripes for a war which they were told was never going to happen and now has happened, and it's called the Epstein War. Whatever fancy name the Israelis and Washington has given it, ordinary people in the street are saying this is more to do with Epstein than anything else. So the mood of the public is volatile. The behavior of the president is of a man who is unhinged, who has lost touch with reality, who is standing in front of a microphone and simply lying. And of course, we're getting the same from Israel. And by the way, any journalists in Israel are being told not to report any damage that has been inflicted on the country by the Iranians' constant attacks. So things are going to get a lot worse. Don't forget the Houthis. The Houthis as yet have not reacted from Yemen, but they have the military capability to wreak havoc in the Gulf. They've done it before, and they're sitting there keeping their powder dry. But you know that any day now they are going to sweep into this war as well. And it's all part of a strategy that the Iranians have been planning, not for a few weeks or a few months. They've been planning this for years, for decades.
Indeed. Thank you. And as things might get uglier, as you said, Dr. Ivan, I would like to ask Dr. Simons from a global South perspective. So the U.S. economic pain is perhaps relative. So for countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or Pakistan, imported inflation from oil prices is catastrophic. So they face, let's say, debt crisis, food insecurity, and social unrest as well. So is the U.S. war on Iran effectively exporting instability to the most vulnerable nations on earth? And what responsibility does Washington bear for that matter?
Well, Washington is expanding this because it's actually waging economic warfare in South Asia against South Asian countries, Bangladesh being one of them, because you're talking about these tariff wars. Now, I mean, obviously Trump is very cognitively challenged. He clearly doesn't understand warfare, but he also doesn't understand tariffs. Because, I mean, he keeps on talking about tariffs to be waged against other countries, seemingly unaware that it's its own citizens who pay the tariffs. But Bangladesh is taking notice. One of the pluses for Bangladesh is that you have had the recent election last month, so you actually have a legitimate government in power. And this government is taking the usual Bangladeshi approach, being a friend to all and an enemy to none. And of course, this contrasts a lot from the government, the interim government, which was named by the Democrats after the July 2024 revolution. So they are watching, and you can see the sentiment is similar to what Yvonne was saying. I mean, you got this Epstein thing, so that rather than calling it epic fury, it's called Epstein's fury, and the humour that soon Trump will need to release the Epstein files in order to distract people from the disaster in Iran. And you've got other similar black humour, as, for example, the idea, well, he's the most efficient president in US history because it took American administrations 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's taken them just a couple of days to replace Ayatollah Khomeini with Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran.
True. Thank you, indeed. So let's just step back and examine the diplomatic path that was abandoned. So the US officials now brief that 3 rounds of negotiations with Iran in Oman and Switzerland collapsed before the war. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi tells Al Arabi Al Jadid that Tehran was very close to an agreement offering to dilute its 60% enriched uranium and reduce enrichment levels. But Washington concluded Iran was never serious and launched Operation Epic Fury. Now, the question goes to you, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. As we're having these breaking news, Donald Trump is saying that Iran has suffered significant damage, claiming it would take the country around 10 years to rebuild if the fighting stopped now, while stressing he has no intention to ending the war. And he's saying that the Iranians are desperate, wanting to negotiate, but he doesn't think they are ready. So you have studied U.S.-Iran diplomacy, Dr. Yvonne, for decades. So the U.S. claims Iran was negotiating in bad faith, and Iran claims it was on the verge of a major concession. Who is telling the truth here? It is obviously a war of narrative. And more importantly, if diplomacy was this close, why did Washington choose war? Was it about the nuclear program, or was it always about regime change, or maybe about controlling the oil, as some media narrative suggests?
Or even about the Epstein files. This is this is a president in trouble, and he has absolutely no morals or scruples. We've seen this by the fact that the international criminal courts are investigating what was carried out in Gaza. And let's not forget, the situation in Gaza. So many dead. From babies in incubators to mothers giving birth in the rubble, horrific human rights abuses, and the children, the Palestinian children that are being held as hostages in Israeli prisons. And Trump has been defending this all along the way. And then, of course, the very first day of the war, a missile was sent into a school. And Hegseth, the Minister of War, denied it and blamed Iran. Every denial that has come out of Washington has been proven wrong. And, of course, America is up to its neck in war crimes at the moment, because it is a war crime to bomb a school. And they have killed more than 100 schoolgirls. This did not play well with the American public. So I would say I wouldn't trust the Americans. And people might say, oh, that's because you're anti-American. I'm not, but I have to look at the facts. And as a journalist, I look at the facts. And America is a country that has torn up, abused, ignored, and trampled on more treaties than you can imagine. And of course, we were told by the foreign minister of Oman, who was party to the nuclear negotiations with Iran and America, that those negotiations were going well. And those negotiations were being held in good faith. Iran was on the brink of some major concessions that would have pleased, if not appeased, the Americans. And the Americans were sitting round the table with the Iranians, knowing fine well that the Pentagon was drawing up the plans to attack Iran. Now, you don't sit and negotiate any form of peace talks with a country when you're writing the final plans to bomb the place, which is what America did. So the Iranians have said, we're not interested in peace talks. We cannot trust the Americans as being honest brokers. And you can't blame them for that. You know, how on earth are the Iranians expected to sit down to peace talks and negotiate with people who've lied to them, who've misled them, who've led them to believe that they can sit down and talk about the nuclear ambitions of Iran while they're planning to blitz the country? And when we were talking about the damage that Iran has received, well, we know that thousands of Iranian citizens have been killed in these indiscriminate airstrikes, and they are indiscriminate, but they are also bombing UNESCO World Heritage sites. There are less than 30 in the world today. And of course, there was a great hoo-ha when the Taliban bombed the Bamyan Buddhas back in 2000, 2001. There was huge outcry. There were delegations being sent from Europe to try and negotiate with the Taliban to save these Buddhas. And yet, despite all of that, some of the most beautiful UNESCO sites in Iran have been damaged and targeted. This is causing a great upset in some parts of the world. Of course, humans are far more precious than buildings, but at the same time, not a word has come out from UNESCO criticizing the attacks on these buildings. And of course, collectively, America and Israel have no history, have no culture. I think that collectively they're about 300 years old, and the buildings that they are destroying are 500, 600, 700 years old. Absolutely beautiful buildings. But of course, we saw the damage that Israel did in Gaza, and they razed to the ground all the Christian churches, and
so it is the end justifies the means for them. Doesn't matter at what cost. Thank you indeed, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. As we are reaching the end of this special coverage, I would like to include Dr. Simons with one more question and another question for Mr. Mark Lowe after that. So, Dr. Simons, the U.S. alleges that during the talks, Iran was moving nuclear assets underground. But from a Russian or Chinese perspective, isn't that exactly what any country would do when facing threats from a superpower? And how do adversaries in general view this narrative? And does the failure of these talks reinforce the view that the US prefers military solutions to diplomatic ones?
Well, firstly, I mean, I thought Operation Midnight Hammer destroyed all of their nuclear materials. That's what he said as an exit from the disastrous 12-day war in June last year. So Trump is not consistent. He doesn't have the brain power to be consistent. And I mean, as Yvonne says, I mean, he just goes from one lie to the next one. He absolutely cannot be trusted. And Iran would be right. Anything of value should be put underground, because this is twice now that Israel and the US have attacked and committed perfidy. That is, there's a sneak attack under the cover of diplomatic negotiations. That's twice, which in itself is a breach of international law, committing these kinds of things. So Russia and China, of course, they're supporting Iran, and I suspect they're supporting it in different ways. I mean, one can say that, I mean, the marksmanship of the attacks in the Gulf states and in Israel has been quite spectacular. And in order to do that, you need information, surveillance and reconnaissance assets to do that. So I think it's a chance for them to repay the US for all the kindness that the US has been doing in the Ukraine war and what it's been doing against China for decades, also trying to weaken and contain China in the Indo-Pacific. So I think a number of the chickens are coming home to roost. And what this next conflict, I mean, Ukraine exposed the US as somewhat of a paper tiger because you had NATO against Russia and expecting a quick Russian capitulation and economic disaster for Russia. And now you have this instance in Iran. But these should not come as a surprise. I mean, when an empire goes into decline, it does some of the most stupid things because it wants to retain its power and privilege. And there is no one with greater hubris, ignorance, and arrogance than Trump. I mean, you've got these various characterizations of Trump as Nero or Caligula and Nero. So he is presiding over what may be the final moments of this Pax Americana, but he cannot see it because he doesn't have the mental capacity and capability to understand what he's unleashing. Like, for example, when he threatened to bomb the oil terminals and so forth in Hague Island, Iran has explicitly threatened if the US does that, the oil, this will be reciprocated throughout West Asia, through Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. And this is what we have at the moment. You can change blocking the Strait of Hormuz. That's a temporary one. But if you start targeting oil production capacity and capability, this is going to be much longer term.
Absolutely.
But I don't think he has the mental capability to understand this because he's a playboy. And I think he's going the Biden route. I mean, you just look at him, his mental awareness and presence is definitely declining. And I would say, in spite of the rhetoric, which he gives, all this feisty rhetoric, you look at the body language and the intonation on his voice. This is not coming from someone who is confident in their ability to win, to succeed in this. This is coming from someone filled with doubts and fear.
So he got himself in trouble. Thank you indeed, Dr. Simons. Now, Mr. Marklow, briefly, please, as we are reaching the end, 2 minutes to be precise. If an agreement was closed, particularly one that would have rolled back Iran's enrichment, the economic implications are staggering. Instead of a deal, we have a war that has shut down the Strait of Hormuz, spiked oil prices, and disrupted global trade. In pure cost-benefit terms, how does this war make any economic sense for the United States or its allies?
Well, thank you for that question. Okay, let's start by asking one important question. Who did the United States of America send to the negotiating table? Point one. Point number two, is there anybody amongst us who actually believes that the American position was an honest position? Now, fortunately, the Omanis were involved. Fortunately, they were coordinating. Fortunately, they were there because we have somebody who tells the truth. The Omani version tells us all that we need to know. Moving forward, we have a complete and utter mess. Does it make any economic sense? I can't think of any reason why it makes any economic sense unless you are fortunate to live very, very far away and not to be directly involved, and you produce gas that can be transported by sea. But even there, you're going to suffer the consequences, the domino effect, the direct and indirect consequences are going to hit you as well. So I cannot think of any reason to think that there is any economic sense in this conflict at all. Or to be more blunt, I can't think that there is any sense in the conflict. End of story. The ripple effects will be massive. The ripple effects will continue over time. And unfortunately, and here I will close, we are in a situation where potentially we have only seen the beginning. We haven't seen the worst. And there's plenty of potential for the situation to become far, far more complex and far more damaging.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Monclo, for those all insights. Thank you as well to Dr. Gregory Simons for your insights. Dr. Yvonne Ridley as well. Thank you indeed for joining us at a last or a short minute notice. Thank you indeed. And thank you, dear viewers, for trusting us with your time. And until next time, good night.